beautiful, windy, cold day in Idaho. You might see my breath because our little shack shop is not very insulated. But today I'm wanting to replace the covers on my seats. They came out of a 1974 260Z, the CrayZ. This car sat in the field for over 20 years and the mice got to the seats, unfortunately. They're really gross. We even vacuumed off the most of it and they still look really gross. And I really don't want to test drive in those seats. So, gotta put some new seat covers on. However, this is not a show car, so you will not see me dropping a lot of money for the best that I can get for these seats. I will probably not be replacing the base pad, just the cover, because the base pad is still in good shape. And I will be using synthetic seat covers. These came from Interior Innovations, very reasonably priced. However, they are overseas, so it makes dealing with customer service a little difficult and communication a little difficult, but it looks like they did a good job. These are the synthetics, and I got the 2 seat covers, a new shift boot, and a new e-brake boot. So actually I had my order mixed up the first go around. They had sent me a leather seat cover instead, and this will actually be cool so you can compare and you can see the difference between the two. The leather is going to be a lot shinier and softer. Synthetic's pretty grippy, and it's a little more of a matte finish, and the leather's a lot more expensive. So if anyone's missing a black bottom leather seat cover with red stitching, I have it, sorry. And I also went with Dorman seat heaters. I figured since I'm already gonna have the covers off, I might as well throw some heaters in there because it's Idaho and it gets cold. But I will warn you, I have never done reupholstery before. This is a first. This is gonna be a struggle. I hope you can learn something from me and my mistakes. If I make mistakes, I'm sure I will. But I will be going off of a really good article that I found on the Classic Seat Car Forum. A guy named Hardway did a really good job. He took a bunch of pictures, wrote up this excellent description of how to do it, including the main pads, really in depth. So that's what I'll be going off of. I'll add that a link to that to the description and a link to all the other parts in the description. And we'll see how it goes. Things escalated quickly after breaking the 4 bits and the bit holders. These were really locked on there and they actually stripped. So, welded a nut to the head of the screw and it zipped right out. So if you haven't tried that trick, it's really slick. And this one's just about to back out. Hey!
Jeez.
That's nasty. Those are not going back in. Yuck. Hey, I feel better now.
Yeah.
Had to walk away last night.
Had to
Now we're down here in our
in
pajamas.
for some nuts.
Nick's in his pajamas. I'm in my pajamas. But we got it.
And a couple broken drivers.
Yeah.
Bits.
The carnage.
Hmm.
That's exciting. Alright guys, so no more pajamas. After our little morning weld session, we got these pesky little Phillips, more Phillips on these seats. On the hinge here, they were locked on really well. So we actually ended up having to weld those to get them off, and as soon as we welded the nut on, they zipped right out. So let's keep tearing it down. We have both seats done. So you can obviously tell which one was the driver. I'm really hoping I can salvage this seat back. It is gross. Very, very rusty, typical Z style. Alright guys, so back in the shop, I actually took all of those dirty parts and got them cleaned up, so check it out. There was a lot of rust. You can actually see the remnants of what's left. Looks like the driver's side was the worst and the frame was pretty bad. You can see some of the pitting left there. So what I did, the metal seemed like it was still structurally sound. So I applied some of this rust fix. It's by Duplicolor. It's a converter. So it stops and it works as a primer as well. So I brushed off the most of the rust and then applied that and then my color. So I think we should be good to go for my lifetime at least. On the seat hinge, I actually had to take one of them apart because it wasn't working. It wasn't springing back and coming forward like it should. And what we found was this little piece right here is supposed to spin, and it allows this arm to kick up and forward and move. And it wasn't moving. It was totally rusted to the arm there. So we had to free that and kind of get everything re-greased and recoated, and it's good as new now. I also had to replace some bolts. Had to weld. These are those ones that we welded the nuts on to get them out because the Phillips screwed. We don't like Phillips. And I also got some M8 stainless flatheads. This was Nick's idea, and I'm really glad he had this idea because this is going to look way better. So these will be the ones that go on the outside on the side hinges, so we won't have the black oxide wearing off. Those are fine everywhere else, but I'm going to want these on the outside. But I still have these to replace. There's not even, like, half the threads are gone. There's supposed to be threads there. This is the same bolt and half the threads. So one more thing, I pulled these little caps off and then reapplied them with spray adhesive. I think these are important. It looks like it shields your cover from that metal edge there, and it's probably quite the wear point. So I put those back on. Hopefully that should help buffer, you know, between the cover and the metal. Let's see how this goes. You ready, Lena? You want a seat to sleep in, huh? Okay, we'll get to work. All right, so we are gonna start on the bottom of your seat, the bottom cushion here. And remember how I wasn't gonna buy new seat cushions? That was false because I did. I bought a set of new foam from Interior Innovations. That was the company I bought the covers from. I've heard that it's really bad to mix and match covers with new foam. So wherever you get your covers from, make sure you get the foam there too, and you should be good to go. The original foams that came out were disgusting and falling apart in the corners, and yeah, I don't want to do this again. So I bit the bullet and bought new ones. So on these bottoms, I decided I want the universal seat heater. So we have to do something a little special with these. You have your wiring harness. They give you some hog rings and some pliers-ish. Hopefully you bought another set because I don't know how well those would work. Maybe in a pinch. Some zip ties. And then you have two universals. You'll notice that this opening is a lot smaller than that opening. This is going to be the piece that we feed the wire through, and it goes through the seat. So that means this is going to have to go through this opening. So you're really not supposed to do this. So don't do this at home. Don't follow my example, but we actually ended up having to cut this a little bit. So I'll show you how that works. You have to be really careful if you do this at home, against all recommendation from me. You have to make sure that you don't cut there's little wires that run through here. And you have to make sure you don't cut into those. So you can cut the felt around them, but not those. Okay, so what I did is I cut in between the wires, and what this is going to allow me to do is when I go to stick the adhesive strips on, I can kind of fudge this a little wider to allow for more of that flap to fit through. Just make sure, do not nick a wire, and make sure you're not cutting too close to the wires if you do this, which I don't recommend you do this. So these flaps don't have adhesive. I wouldn't recommend putting masking tape on them. They should sit right down once we get the cover over them, and we're ready for the seat cover. Okay, so now you can kind of see why we were limited by that seat heater, but I really want seat heaters, so we will make do. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut these just to narrow it up a little bit. Okay, so now that we have this trimmed down, we're gonna trim a piece of wire. Make sure it's the same thickness as what came out of the seat, if not thicker. So it's like a really thick coat hanger that I have. Make sure you're about a 1/2 inch, maybe more, maybe closer to 1 inch off either side, and bend it over so it can't work its way out side to side. Okay, another thing that you're gonna need is zip ties. These are a lifesaver on these seats. So I put little slits through that flap there, one in the middle and one on the end, and make sure you're not too close to the end. Make sure they're only large enough for a zip tie. Get that tucked in there. Now, at this point, you're gonna wanna make sure that your seat cushion is pretty well centered in the cover. If you got these seat covers, they may not be symmetrical, but it's worth a shot. Once you're sitting in them, you aren't gonna see it. I'm probably not the right person to be doing this tutorial, but it's better than the previous seat covers. If you dig around in there, you're gonna drag out those zip tie tails. It's like doing surgery. I swear, it'll be easier when you see what they're for. Okay, so we have our 3 zip ties through, and then the frame's gonna go on. I centered these bars on the slit of the cushion, so I know that my frame is centered on the cushion. And then the top of this line of springs will go to the edge of this slit. That way, our hog rings and zip ties will go around that. Because that flap that's way down in there has to come through so you can hog ring it to the frame. And make sure when you're pulling these up to your frame that you're pulling them evenly. I had lots and lots of them break. You put a little pressure on the frame and just work them one by one. Hey, I can see it. Our flap is pulled all the way through, and we're starting to get close to those springs. Now that I have those holding, I'm gonna sneak my little razor blade through and put 2 more slots for zip ties. Make sure when you're threading those through the flap that you're going underneath the wire and it's actually pulling up on the wire. It's really easy to not go through the wire. So you really can't see anything under there. So we're right there. Some of you might want to just leave the zip ties, but I'm gonna try and be a little bit proper on this and do some hog rings just for good measure. I was actually really impressed with these hog ring pliers that I got off Amazon. I've never used hog ring pliers before, but these did great. There's a little groove in there that your clip will fit in, and then it kind of locks in. It's gonna be really hard to see, but what I'm gonna try and do is send one of those points through and make sure I'm at a good point where I can, when I close it, it's wrapping around the wire in the flap and the frame. And if you kind of rock it back and forth, you can be sure that you're through all the material. Okay, so these are all good to go. So now this cover has to go over all of this and over these points. And it's gonna be fun. Make sure your string is untied in the back. My seat cushion has a seam here in the middle, so I'm gonna try and center that in between these points here and hope that it's kind of close. And then very, 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 very carefully, because you don't want to cut too far, you're gonna put a little tiny slit in where the material is doubled up right here. About where we're gonna make sure that the point is all the way up and over. And there you go. So that's gonna be the first one, and what we're gonna do is bend it back. So they recommend start on the front and then work down the sides. So I'm gonna go through and do that. and show you guys when it's done. Okay, so these last two on the back are a bear. Usually it's easier if you can get it on the ground and put your weight on here, on this part, on a towel, of course. And then it helps, you know, compress everything so you can get these bent. There are two in the middle that my cover doesn't reach. So if yours doesn't reach there, my last one turned out okay, so I'm guessing it's okay. They give you a little string to tie. What that'll do is pull all of your corners tight. Do your double knot so it doesn't come loose. I'm gonna sneak this wiring through and just hook it on my frame there. This is gonna be for the seat heater later. Now comes the scary part. So your hinge bolts onto the sides here, and you're gonna need to poke holes through your seat cover for that. Really sure that you're in the right spot. You can usually feel it through the seat cover. And then we're just gonna do kind of a cross over where that screw is gonna go. And be really careful that you don't overcut here. All right, and then you're also gonna want to pick up a tap. This one cost me $5 from Napa, the M8 by 1.25. I'm chasing the threads for all of my bolts on the first seat when I tried. I don't know if they were rusted out or all gummed up, and probably had some paint in there too. Just go through, save yourself some headache, especially if you're using stainless hardware like I am. You can't just plow through the paint. I tried, it didn't work. So I would just put some WD-40 on these. I'm gonna zip through and clean up those threads. All right, so once you have those tapped, we put on our hinges. And I'm gonna use my pretty stainless bolts here because my seats, the covers are broken up on the sides. So I don't know when I'm gonna have covers there. So if anyone has any that they don't need, they need it set. All right, so that wraps up the bottom. Got our hinges on, got the bottom slides on. So now we're gonna do the seat back and then get this all bolted together. All right, so now onto the back. The way these foams are made, and now I don't know if other vendors or other manufacturers are the same way. There's a lip here where it has to hook over the top of your metal seat frame, like so. That way when you're resting on the seat back or putting weight there, you aren't going directly seat cover to metal. Also, here on the bottom. So I tried to put my first seat cover on without doing anything to the cover and just hoping it stayed in place, and it definitely did not. Yeah, you could totally see what it's doing right now right through the seat cover, so it didn't just fall into place. So I would highly recommend, I use the 3M adhesive, and now I'm going to adhesive right here, and I'll spray on both surfaces, and then I'm going to spray the top as well. And so that'll help keep things anchored just enough so when you get the cover on, it's not going to move, and then it should be good to go. So take your time, do this, make sure it dries and cures before you keep going. Alright, so once your spray adhesive gets pretty cured, you'll see that that seat top is right over the edge, and these sides are flipped over. Now the one thing I noticed, I don't know if this is a casting issue, I don't know if this is a foam issue, when you pull those edges out, it lifts up the center here, which had me really concerned on the first set. But once this is totally cured and you start putting pressure here on the seat cover, it almost does like a stretch. I don't know. It does foam things and it works out. So maybe a little lumbar support there by bad foam pad. For this top cover, you're gonna wanna turn it inside out. So about 80% of the way. We're only gonna fold it down until we get another one of these flaps out. And we're gonna do the same thing on this one, but we aren't gonna have to cut this one down because there's no seat heater that goes up that high. Make sure this goes towards the front, obviously, and just leave it over the top. Okay, so one other thing I'll cover before we go any farther. You'll notice that there's no foam on the back of my frame. And that was intentional. I actually bought foam for the back of the frame because in the tutorial that I have linked, he used foam. When I disassembled my seats, the only thing between this seat cover, the original seat covers, which are just a canvas, there's no foam padding at all, was this super, super paper thin. I mean, there's nothing there. That was the only thing between this and the seat bag from factory Nissan. These seat covers already have padding, thicker padding than that foam on the back, so I opted not to add more padding to the back. So maybe that's why I had an easier time doing the backs than other people I had talked to. But I would compare what you're pulling off your original seat to what you're putting on with the new covers. This is where it gets fun. In the tutorial that I linked, he actually broke this bottom part off and his went together okay. Because you have to try and get into this slot to the metal bar that's back here, and we're gonna be hog-ringing this wire down to the back of the seat frame. So it's gonna be very interesting. So we're actually gonna use the very same zip tie trick. Gosh, this is handy. This made it so much easier. So I'm gonna do a slot on the end. Maybe a couple more, maybe 4 on this one. Feed our zip ties through. So this is even more like doing surgery because you can't see at all what you're doing on this one. I'm gonna feed my zip tie down and wrap it around that metal bar and then link them and do that for all 4. Okay, now that we have all 4, we're gonna cinch it all the way down and do the same thing we did on the bottom. Do it one bit at a time and work your way down. And once you have all those cinched down, you're gonna kind of pull this back and sink some hog rings in there. If you have someone to give you a hand, it would make it a lot easier. I don't at the moment. Nick's working on shop things, which is super, super cool. So I'm working on this on my own. With this one, it's a lot easier to miss the wire that's in that flap. So make sure you're 100% around that wire or else you aren't doing any good. Okay, so I did 5 hog rings. Once that's all done, we will clip these tails. Okay. Now time for the seat heaters. Do not forget your seat heaters. It's really easy to forget them. I did it on both of my first ones. So on this, just kind of guesstimate where you want. We don't have to cut this one. So if you feel safer not cutting them at all, you can go for just having a back heater, which is fine too. Adhesive down. And one trick that I found on the first set is I kept my old foam. So when I'm setting my seat down on these points, I'm not bending them and squishing them into the floor or into the table. So now, same concept as the bottom. We're actually gonna do this one first. I'm going off the tutorial. He liked the idea of, hooking the back first, and then the front will come and hook over the back. So I'll do as many as I can on the table, and then we might need to put it down on the floor. And me just hugging my seat cover. Okay, so just to clarify, you aren't cutting this flap, you're going to be cutting this reinforcement flap here. Make sure your wire is routed out. Now comes the fun part. All right, so same idea on this one. Are you gonna help? Yeah, go lay down, go lay down, go lay down, go lay down. Well then get down right there. Okay, Lena's gonna help. So on this one, it helps to have it on the ground. So you can put your body weight in the middle to help bring these together. And we're gonna start in the middle and work our way out. Okay, so after you get the first one, it gets a lot easier, I promise. First one's the worst. You'll get a little tearing where it's pulling through. I make sure, my thought process was that I would be on this side of this edging, and we'll go from there. Lena's still helping. Alright, so I got a little cut off there at the end. So on these corners, you're gonna tuck and wrap around that corner here. And just kind of tuck that in. I think these covers are a little bit short, so they didn't quite reach the bottom, but that's okay. It'll be covered up by the hinge, and you really shouldn't see it. So we're all buttoned up on the bottom. Corners are tucked, and I cut for the mounting holes for the hinge, and we're gonna go ahead and chase those threads and then get those all bolted together. All right, there you have it. 2 Datsun Z seats recovered and brought back to life. So I hope this helps somebody out there. If you liked it, like the video, share your experience, any questions down in the comments, and subscribe for any future videos. And to see Lena riding in this seat actually, and not just sleeping. Huh. Yeah. You wanna go bye-bye? Do you wanna go on the Z? Yeah, you wanna ride in your seat with your goggles? Thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next one.